Current time is 10:42 a.m., 10/29/2025. I'm going to comment on the Twin Towers in New York, Islam, and Judaism.
Mayor, Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We end today's show here in New York, where early voting began this weekend in the city's mayoral race with a record 164,000 ballots cast in the first 2 days. Democratic Socialist Mayor candidate Zoran Mamdani spoke Sunday evening before 13,000 supporters who packed the Forest Hill Stadium.
Together, New York, we're going to freeze the. Together, New York, we're going to make buses fast, and. Together, New York, we're going to deliver universal. We will make our city one where every person who calls it home can live a dignified life.
Mamdani spoke alongside Independent Senator Bernie Sanders, New York Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and New York Governor Kathy Hochul, who endorsed Mamdani over former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who she replaced when Cuomo resigned in disgrace in 2021 after an inquiry found he sexually harassed at least 11 women. If elected, Zoran Mamdani would be the city's first Muslim mayor. In recent days, he's faced a string of Islamophobic attacks, including from Cuomo, who made this widely condemned remark Thursday on the Sid and Friends in the Morning radio show.
Any given morning is a crisis, and people's lives are at stake. God forbid another 9/11. Can you imagine Mamdani in the seat?
Yeah, I could. He'd be cheering.
9/11. When it stopped here, I'll tell you.
It's another problem.
9/11, those buildings were hit from the northeast top floor corner. But within a week or two before, men went in and set charges at every corner, every 4 floors from the base to the top, both buildings. The planes hit, the buildings imploded. That's a common way to destroy a building. You can watch an old video of it. Our country did that. I believe the younger Mr. Trump was in charge at the time. A building hit by a 747 at the northeast corner, it blows off the top. Not in, it doesn't fold in on itself.
But can you imagine that?
No.
And I'm not sure, but I think Cuomo, Italiano, worked for Mitch McConnell to not only teach Trump ad bullshit, but those are the boys that tried to stack the federal courts in their favor.
On Friday, Zoran Mamdani responded to the surge of Islamophobia in the mayoral campaign, speaking outside the Islamic Cultural Center in the Bronx.
To be Muslim in New York is to expect indignity. But indignity does not make us distinct. There are many New Yorkers who face it. It is the tolerance of that indignity that does.
Leading Democratic mayoral candidate Zoran Mamdani speaking Friday. For more, we're joined by Meher Ahmed, a staff editor for the New York Times Opinion section. She interviewed Mamdani for her New York Times Opinion essay headlined, "When I look at Zoran Mamdani, here's what I see." Welcome to Democracy Now! What do you do?
I'll also say, talking about the jihad. In the Quran, it talks about the sword of the jihadists, Yadin. That has to do with the mind and the heart and the eye. Sharp as an arrow, straight, strong, like Damascus steel. It has to do with what's called in Latin veritas, or French bride, not killing. Isn't it the Bible that says, they who live by the sword shall die by the sword? Who in our government's doing that, right?
I see a dynamic that I think lots of Muslims have experienced in the United States, which is when they're given positions of power or are in a position of public scrutiny, that their faith is often the first thing that gets scrutinized. And that's part of the reason I was interested in writing this piece. I think
Shabbat Shalom
I
and
saw the
Salam.
degree of Islamophobia that
Shalom
Mamdani was already
means
facing after the Democratic primary
Shalom
nomination in
means
June.
peace.
And was
Salam
shocked,
means peace.
not just at
Sure,
the
has nothing
cadence
to
of
do with
attacks,
it.
but also the kind of rhetoric that was being used against him by people within his own party.
So talk about what he's faced right up through, well, President Trump and most recently Vice President J.D. Vance.
That's right. In the last week or so, we're seeing kind of outright Islamophobic attacks against him where politicians have said things like another 9/11 could happen if he were to become mayor. They've outright called him a jihadist or terrorist. But in the weeks prior to that, what we've seen is kind of a normalization of Islamophobic attacks against him, accusations of him being anti-Semitic, accusations of him harboring hatred towards Jews. And these kinds of accusations are ones that I think many Muslims are very familiar with. So we've kind of witnessed these attacks as a way to sideline us when we enter positions of power. And with Mamdani being one of the most high-profile politicians right now with the Muslim faith, that's
and if
kind
anything
of
like the Twin Towers
main
happens
line of
again,
attack against him.
it'll be our
Mamdani
job.
was talking about what happened after 9/11
Remember
with Muslims,
July.
Especially in New York.
This month,
And,
Bashir,
Republicans like Vice President J.D. Vance attacked his comments. Vance wrote, quote, according to Zoran, the real victim of 9/11 was his auntie who got some allegedly bad looks. Talk more about what happened. I mean, this generation that has grown up in the wake of 9/11, of Muslim New Yorkers and Americans.
Yeah, and in New York in particular, where there was a large NYPD surveillance program that was deemed unconstitutional after the fact, Muslims were surveilled
NYPD
in
did
their
not have the
place of
correct
prayer, in their
information.
homes, at sporting events, really in everyday aspects of their lives. And what that ends up doing to a community is it puts them on the back foot. It makes it feel as though we need to prove ourselves as not guilty to be able to participate in the city and to participate in any aspect of life. So to become politically engaged felt that much more frightening. I think Mamdani speaks to this. There's this feeling of the way that you act amongst yourselves in your community privately, where you feel more free to be yourself versus how you act when you go out into the street. And after 9/11, there was an uptick of Islamophobic attacks against Muslims all over the country, but particularly in New York City. And people who were visibly Muslim, particularly women who wear hijabs, often became the target of those kinds of attacks. I think Mamdani's comments had to do with the fact that his aunt, he said, felt too uncomfortable to go into public because she was wearing a hijab. J.D. Vance's comment.
Also, here in Kansas City years ago, a young male Christian fundamentalist went into an old Hebrew temple on Warner and shot people attending Summit. I don't know if he was convicted or not. I do know they shut down that entire beautiful temple that was shaped like a tent.
And mock that and say, oh, she's, supposedly the real victim of 9/11 because she felt this way. I think there's many, many victims of that event, and to discount the experience of Muslim Americans as being one that needs to be compared to, other victims of that attack really makes it so that we have no right to be, to even express that we've been facing racism and bigotry.
Zoran Mamdani, when he was state assembly member, got arrested outside Senator Schumer's house. Maybe that's not why he has not endorsed him around the issue of Gaza. Mamdani's been very outspoken on Palestinian rights. I interviewed him at the Jewish Voice for Peace mass protest, about 1,000, mainly Jews, shutting down Grand Central around Gaza. You write.
Also say, just to include, second week of Biden's election, the U.S. bombed Palestine. Everyone I knew there, including Rose, my friend, is dead. They were our allies. The people they murdered under Biden were supporters of the U.S. Rose was trying to learn to be a doctor at the Marine base there.
Candidates become an avatar for many things, but when it comes to Islamophobia after October 7th, Mr. Mamdani is the poster child for the double standards Muslims in America are held to today. Explain.
I think advocating for Palestine is a complicated and difficult thing to do in the United States for a variety of reasons, but advocating for Palestinian rights while being Muslim is a particularly unique experience. And I think part of that is because anti-Palestinian sentiment kind of rides on the back of Islamophobic ideas of who Muslims are. So when Muslims such as Mamdani advocate for Palestinian human rights, it becomes not just that they're advocating for Palestinians, but they're advocating for violence or attacks against Jews. And that's exactly what we've seen, the accusations being hurled against him. We saw a group of rabbis say that Jews would be in danger if he was to become the mayor. Some of the people that I spoke to for this story.
He's only advocating for nonviolence for everyone, regardless of religion. That kind of goes back to separation of state and religion in our Constitution.
I kind of asked to elaborate. When you say you live in fear of him, what do you actually mean? And the explanation that I heard was that his criticism of Israel, which has now been accepted by multiple human rights organizations, is equivalent to advocating for violence against Jews. What I argue is that kind of assumption of Muslims is inherently racist, to assume that we have hatred towards Jews, and to kind of use that as a bludgeon to make it.
Also, a group of, say, Orthodox rabbinical people in New York has nothing to do with a world of rabbis who do not agree with the boys who say Jews will be in danger in New York if an Islamic mayor who holds the Constitution, both of the state of New York and the U.S. government, is in power. Rabbi only means teacher, doesn't mean God. Okay?
Our views on Palestine can't be expressed publicly.
And of course, so many thousands of his organizers or canvassers on the ground are Jewish New Yorkers.
Exactly.
I want to end by thanking you. Meher Mohammed is a staff editor for the New York Times opinion section. Her latest essay for the New York Times is headlined, "When I Look at Zohran Mamdani, Here's What I See." In the print version, the headline was, "What does it mean to be a good Muslim in America?" That does it for our show. Democracy Now! Is produced